these socks, we're going to need to take two measurements. You're going to need the circumference of your foot at the widest part, and you're also going to need your foot length measuring from the base of your toes to where your heel begins. And this is going to be the anatomy of the sock I'm going to be using for the terminology in this pattern. Begin by making a chain that measures the same as your foot length. Now there are no multiples involved with this pattern, so just crochet however many chains you need to reach that length, and be sure to jot those down so you can make a second matching sock later. The main stitch for this pattern is the chain stitch. Now there is a tutorial available if you need it slowed down, but for the purposes of making this tutorial just a little shorter, we're going to do the quick and dirty version here. After you've made your chain, you're going to skip the first stitch, and you're going to insert your hook into the second one, and you're going to begin a cast on. So it's just yarn over and pull up a loop, leave the loop on your hook, and repeat with every stitch of the chain. You should have the same number of loops on your hook as the number of stitches in your chain. The return pass you're going to be using throughout this pattern is just a regular return pass, so yarn over and pull through one. For the rest of the hooks on, the loops on your hook, you're going to yarn over and pull through two until you're left with just one loop on your hook. With the foundation row complete, we can now look at row 1, which is going to be the row you're going to repeat throughout the rest of this section of fabric. So here's a breakdown of what our row is going to look like. Now we're going to be using a Tunisian simple stitch throughout this entire piece of fabric. You're just going to be alternating between the back leg and a front leg. So for every row, you're going to skip the first vertical stitch and cast on in the second one. We begin with a back leg Tunisian simple stitch. In vertical stitch number 3, we're going to do a front leg Tunisian simple stitch and follow it up with a back leg one. And then for the rest of the row, you're just going to alternate between the front leg and the back leg Tunisian simple stitch. Now I ended in a front leg stitch. That doesn't necessarily mean that you will. I had 32 stitches in order to get the length I needed. And to give you a bit of a point of reference, that's for 5.5 women's shoe size here in the US. So any other shoe size, you might have a different stitch count. Just end the row in whatever stitch it is you end in, whether it's back leg, front leg, doesn't matter. End the row, and you're going to cast on into the final stitch of the row. So here you can see I'm casting on as the front leg, and then this right here is the final stitch of the row. So just make sure you grab the two side stitches and then yarn over and pull up a loop to cast on. You're going to use the same return pass throughout this entire project, so it's just the yarn over, pull through one, then yarn over, pull through two until you complete the row. And then repeat this same row and return pass until your fabric reaches the length that you need for your foot circumference. So I needed a length of 8 inches, which was approximately 41 rows. Now that row count does not include my foundation row nor my bind off row. Or is it or? Neither, nor, either, or, I don't remember. Anyway, so here is the foundation row. So begin from row 1. That's at least where I started counting. You can count from whatever you want. Just make sure you jot down the number of rows and whether or not you counted the foundation and the bind off row as part of your row count, so that you can make 2 matching socks. Or not. I mean, you can just go crazy and make one giant sock and a little sock. It's up to you. All right, so here's what our fabric is going to look like once we reach the length that we need. We're going to have to do a bind off before moving on. So a bind off is going to be very simple. You're going to cast on in the same way that you cast on your row 1. So skip the first stitch and back leg Tunisian simple stitch on the second vertical stitch. Once you have 2 loops on your hook, you're going to yarn over and close as a single crochet. So yarn over and pull through 2. For your next stitch, you're going to cast on as a front leg simple stitch, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2. So repeat the sequence with the back leg, front leg cast on, and then just make sure you close as a single crochet once you have 2 loops on your hook. And what that will give you is this pretty little edge. Look at this cute thing. So that you have nice and even stitching on both sides, when you get to the sewing part. So to finish this off, you're going to single crochet at the end of the row, then just chain 1. That's going to make a knot. Cut your yarn, pull that through, weave in ends, and then you're ready to move on to the next section, which is going to be sewing together the 2 narrow ends of your fabric to create a tube for the foot part of your sock. Now, for those of you that are a little bit more particular about the way your seam that is on the bottom part of your sock is going to look, you can block your fabric, which will ensure that your seam is a little bit neater than mine was. So for the toe part of the toe section of this pattern, you're going to hold your fabric the same way I had in the previous photo. So this one right here, divvy it up into 2 sections, the top of the sock and the bottom of the sock, and place stitch markers on both sides. Count your stitches to make sure that you have the same number of stitches on the top and bottom part of your sock. You should have anywhere between 20 to like 24 stitches or something like that. If you have an odd number of stitches, either add or subtract another stitch. You need an even number of stitches so that you can cast on this section, since we're going to be increasing and decreasing on either side, and it makes it a lot easier if you have an even number. All right, so you can see here that I've already finished casting on my foundation row for the toe section of the socks. Now just begin, well, I began at least on the top part of the sock, as opposed to the bottom. It really doesn't matter. Pick one of the stitch markers and work your way across. Just cast on like you would a regular foundation row and work a return pass. Now for row number 1 for the toe section, you always again skip the first vertical stitch, move on to the second one, and you're going to cast on knit stitches this time. So for the knit stitch, remember that the vertical stitch is made up of 2 legs. It's got the front leg and the back leg of the stitch, as you can see here. A knit stitch, all you do is insert your hook between both of the legs of the stitch, go all the way to the back of the fabric, yarn over, and pull up a loop. And that's a knit stitch. So you're going to repeat this in every one of the stitches of the row, at least for the first row. We're going to begin our decreases every other row beginning on row number 2. So after a few rows, your work should look like this. Now let's go over how to do the decrease. So let's pretend that this is row number 2, because we're going to be decreasing our rows 2, 4, 6, etc. You're going to skip the first vertical stitch, go into the second and third one. So Tunisian simple stitch into vertical stitch number 2, and then knit stitch into stitch number 3. You're going to yarn over, and you're going to pull up a loop, pulling the thread through both of those vertical stitches so that you only cast on one loop for those 2 stitches. Now for the next few stitches, you're going to just cast on a regular knit stitch. So it's just knit stitch till you get to the last 2 vertical stitches of the row. And because I don't have a whole lot of stitches left, I'm just going to continue working without skipping the video. But when you get to the last 2 vertical stitches, you're going to repeat the same thing we just did. So Tunisian simple stitch in the first, knit stitch in the second, and then just cast on a regular stitch into the final stitch of the row. So simple stitch, knit stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then cast on into the final stitch of the row. Now if you're looking at the written pattern, this is going to be knit 2 together. Okay, so to recap, you're going to do a regular row of knit stitch and then follow it up with a decreased row of knit stitch until you've cast on half of the number of stitches as what you started with. So if you cast on 20 stitches for the toe section, you should end up with 10 stitches by the time you're done decreasing. This is decreasing every other row. And just a quick note from personal experience, because I've done this for other adult socks, if you cast on 22 stitches as the base of your toes, you cannot cast on 11 stitches at the end because you're decreasing by 2 every other row. So you'll either end up with 12 loops on your hook or 10 loops on your hook. You're going to have to pick one of those 2. So any other even number whose halfway point is an odd number, just pick one, go to the next or closest even number, and then just stop there. Yeah, if you have any questions about that, just feel free to email me or leave it in the comment section. So to continue the toe section, now that we finished all our decreases, we are going to increase. So we're going to create an hourglass shaped figure for the toe section. You're going to do your increases the same row distribution as you did your decreases. So every other row. For your increase, you're going to yarn over and knit stitch into the second stitch of the row, and then just knit stitch into the other stitches all the way across. And then the increase at the end of the row is a little bit different. So you're going to go to the final stitch of the row. Now, if you take a look at this final stitch, it's got 3 legs. So it's got the inside one and it's got 2 side legs. So using the inside leg, you're going to Tunisian simple stitch. So pull it up just like this, yarn over, pull up a loop. That is the increase. Now to finish the row, you do still have to cast on into that final stitch of the row. So between that inside leg and the 2 side legs, you're going to insert your hook like so, yarn over, and pull up a loop. And there you go. That was your increase. So I don't even know what I was trying to say there. So just repeat the knit stitch regular row and then your increase knit stitch row until you have cast on the same number of stitches that you cast on when you first cast on the toe section. I know that's a lot of words there. So if you cast on 20 stitches at the beginning of the toe section, you decreased it down to 10, and now you're going to increase again back to 20. So again, this is going to be an hourglass-like shape. And then once you've reached the stitch count that you need, you have to do another bind off. So the knit stitch bind off is simple. You just cast on a knit stitch, and then once you have your 2 loops, you yarn over, pull through 2. That's it. You're going to repeat this in every one of the vertical stitches of the row. Once you're through, cut a long-ish tail of yarn so that you can use that for sewing. Now, the way you're going to sew it is you're going to fold your hourglass in half so that it resembles a trapezoid, and then you're going to sew along the bottom part of the sock, like so, and along the sides. So this is what the sides look like. And then this is the front of the sock where we had cast on. Now, if you want a rounder look for the top, you can just kind of round it off as you stitch, tighten it up, and then you're good to go. Now, all the steps we just did, you are going to repeat them a second time to make the heel. So again, fold the 2 part of the sock in half and then make your trapezoid just like we did here, only you're not going to sew the bottom part closed. So here's a look at the heel. Now what you're going to do here is just going to fold it in half like so and sew along the sides. Don't sew along the top part because that's where your foot needs to go in, but do sew along the sides. So once you've got that all stitched up, your heel is going to look like this. For some reason, I decided to use 2 stitch markers. You don't need to. I highly recommend using 1 stitch marker to mark where your row, or your round, I suppose, begins. So we're going to begin the round by using a single crochet. Get yourself all set up. And now we're going to be looking at the stitch here on the side. If you're using the written pattern, you're going to see that I wrote the outside and the inside leg of the stitch. So this is what I'm referring to. So if you turn your work sideways like I just did, you'll see that little V. So we're going to be working in alternating pattern between the front and, or the inside and outside leg of the stitch. This section is worked as a half double crochet. So you're going to yarn over and insert your hook into the inside leg of the stitch. Pull up a loop, and once you have 3, and yes, I know I have 4, but we just single crocheted using 2 threads of yarn. But once you have your 3 loops, yarn over and pull through all 3. Now next, you're going to yarn over and insert your hook into the back leg of the stitch. Once you have 3 loops, you're going to yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. And then you just continue to alternate. So it's a half double crochet alternating between the inside leg and the outside leg of the stitch. You're going to do this all the way around the entire circumference of the sock. So not just the heel, it's the whole heel and the whole top part of the sock. Do not skip any stitches. This section might look a little wide, but you need that width in order to be able to fit your foot in. So don't skip any stitches, and then try to use all of the stitches along these sides. So right under where your, I guess the little heels would be, right under there, you're going to have a whole bunch of stitches just kind of compressed together. Crochet into all of those. Try not to miss any. And then once you've completed your round, like I said, it might look a little wide, but you're going to continue working the same pattern in the round, and believe it or not, it starts to close up a little bit more. And that simply results from the difference in the width of the stitching. So the stitching along the sides of the sock, right when you work your first round, is wider than the size of your half double crochet. So your half double crochet are a little bit narrower of a stitch. So the tension for that first round is generally a little bit more loose if you are able to control a little bit more, but keep that one a little bit more loose. And as you create more rounds, it slowly and naturally starts to tighten a little bit more, simply because the width of the stitch just kind of starts to regulate. So work between 5 to 7 rounds, depending on, how tall you want that cuff to be, and then just jot that down, and you can again do it for your second sock, or not. But that's it. Once you finish your cuff, make sure you go through and weave in any remaining tail ends, and you're all set to go. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section below. My email address is also available down in the description box if you have any questions about the written pattern, which is available in my shop. So I have all the links down in the description box for anyone who wants them. Thank you so much for watching, and I guess I'll see you in the next tutorial.